Welcome to today's webinar on cost to serve. Just a quick intro. My name's Adam Hill. I'm responsible for business development within Bedford, who are a Anaplan partner. And joining me today is Chris, who's a solutions consultant. And when we get to the demonstration stage, I'll let Chris introduce me in a bit more detail. In terms of how the flow of today is going to go, I'm going to give just a quick overview of who Bedford are, and then we'll touch on the Anaplan platform, how it brings advantages to our customers, and then we'll move into a demonstration of cost to serve. So just a quick intro to Bedford. So we're the oldest and largest solely focused Anaplan partner across the EMEA. Been doing it since 2011. Very much the trusted delivery partner for Anaplan. We've got 150 plus customers, a wealth of experience on implementation. So we're up at 380 plus implementations, and very much a growing team of Anaplan experts as well, which we're incredibly proud of. Topping that off, we've won Partner of the Year for 2020, which is our 5th year running. So very proud of that achievement. Worth pointing out while we're on this as well, we are a source of training as well. So please reach out for any existing customers that are looking for training on Anaplan, and equally any existing customers, please reach out to ourselves as well. And I'll put some details at the end around our care program as well, which is a relatively new offering from ourselves, but really helps customers make the most of their platform. So what is Anaplan? Very much it's a kind of phrase. It's all planning for all people. Start off with Anaplan. It's a cloud-based planning analytics platform. Therefore, it's hosted in the cloud. You can access it from anywhere via browser, and equally from our mobile applications available on tablet and mobile phone. The beauty of it being a platform is it is business owned, so it's there for the teams to develop the applications that suit your processes, to suit your demands, and it really gives the flexibility and the scalability across your business. There are applications available as well that can be deemed as accelerators, but there's hundreds of apps available to get customers up and running at pace. And then the great thing about Anaplan is there's a real community to it. We've just hosted CPX, which was a fantastic turnout, and some great announcements on that. But the Anaplan community is really powerful, and lots of people sharing good ideas. There's a real openness across that of how sharing stories on how Anaplan's transformed how they do their business. Some of those key advantages that we can provide to organisations are listed just here, but time savings is a significant one. We go into a lot of customers and see a lot of almost wasted energy and effort around checking data, making sure the data is right, sending data around the business, not trusting that data. So we see a real advantage in that single source of truth of owning the information in Anaplan that's shared across your enterprise. That's seen significant time savings and really gets people into doing the analysis that's required rather than the digging out the right information. So a big saving there. Ultimately, we want to remove the spreadsheets. We don't want spreadsheets being sent round on emails. We see huge value in everybody collaborating on the same platform, and Anaplan facilitates that. Changes and scalability are key parts of the Anaplan product, and the speed in which we can manage change, what ifs, bring a new organisation in, change SKUs. It's all at the touch of a button, and it's business owned. You're not relying on somebody to go do that for you. It's there for you as the leader in your business. Again, we talk about scalability, and that we can go from SKU level, bill of material level, and that real granular planning, all the way up to that top level of looking down on KPIs and providing the right data for all the different people within an organisation. Across that, we've been able to operate in multi-dimensions, which is the power of our calculation engine. it really brings the insights from those divisions. So all of a sudden we can sit around a table with sales, with marketing and finance, and start to look at those what if scenarios and make changes across the whole enterprise rather than operating in our silos. And then just to reiterate that with eliminating spreadsheets and the time saving stuff, we see a lot of error reduction and consensus planning, which really gets us to that version of the truth and brings everybody into that planning process. So in terms of today's webinar, we're very much focusing on the supply chain and the cost to serve, which you can see in the pink honeycombs on the screen there. But again, it's to reiterate, Anaplan is a platform to develop lots of applications on there, and it can work in your finance, sales, supply chain, human resources team. And these models all talk. They can all pull the same data sets, so we've got that single version of the truth. But very much today is focused on supply chain and in particular cost to serve. Just on what that looks like in terms of a supply chain fundamentals, these are examples of just some of the use cases we see in supply chain, and Bedford ourselves have delivered a large portion of these across lots of organisations. But really, just to show that we've got that scale across, we can be your tool for everything you can think of. Really, anything that you're doing in a spreadsheet today. Anything you're looking at reporting on, we can do in Anaplan. And the real focus today is that cost to serve application, the value that will bring to your business. Just a little bit on some of the supply chain organisations that Anaplan are proud to call customers. Some very much household names there, but you can see it's cost savings, it's time savings, it's decision making. It's really powerful having all that data in one place, and there's some testimonies there. And at the end, please feel free to reach out. I've got a lot more information on a lot of these case studies that may be of interest to yourselves. With all that good stuff comes lots of recognition, which we're extremely proud of. Again, recognize we've cornered the market in terms of connected planning now, and very much the accolades keep flowing in, as you can see on the screen there. And then just a higher level view of some of the customers and the verticals that we've delivered in there as well. Again, good household names. These aren't just supply chain; these are across all of the offerings that Anaplan can provide for. But it's a go-to tool across a large portion of markets now. With that, I will hand over to Chris, who will take us through a demonstration of cost to serve.
Cool, thank you very much, Adam. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just share my screen. Perfect. Hopefully you can see that okay. So as Adam mentioned, I'm a solutions consultant working for Bedford. My plan for the next half hour or so is to take you through this cost to serve model that we've developed on the Anaplan platform. The idea behind this model is to calculate the full cost of serving each and every customer if you want to go down to that level, and as a result understand their true profitability. So not just stopping at a margin level, but including costs related to freight. It could be indirect materials, indirect labor, even costs like the cost of the account managers that you might have, customer service cost, and then attributing that to the individual customers. Importantly, it's not just on a historical basis using the actuals and allocating them down to customers. It's also able to see how that cost runs out into the future based on a planned demand. It allows you to create multiple scenarios very quickly, as Adam mentioned. So that could be best case versus worst case in terms of demand comparisons, or in this case for cost to serve, it could be to answer specific questions. So, for one customer, what if we only sent out full truckloads, for example? What if we changed their Incoterms or raised minimum order quantities for specific customers? What would that have in terms of an impact on the cost to serve? Or what would be the impact if we dropped a customer completely? So where there's customers that are perhaps unprofitable, what if we just took them out of the equation? How would the reallocation of other costs work across the remaining customers? Jumping into just one of the ending dashboards, just to talk through kind of the categories that we're looking at here. We can see the core sections. So we've got our sales, adding in things like returns and rebates, getting down to net sales. We then bring in some of the direct costs, that could be the materials, sourcing, labor, machine costs, getting down to a standard margin level. So some of you, if you're already existing customers for Anaplan, may have already got down to this level. So for a particular individual SKU or set of products, working out the margin of those. The idea behind the cost to serve model is we're taking that a step further. So if I move down even further here, you can see bringing in customer service costs, so order management, it could be the sales costs, all of the distribution costs, the distribution itself, pallet costs, security of the deliveries, all based on different Incoterms, and then any other allocated costs that you want to bring in as well. So in this case, looking at things like planning overhead, supply chain management, even marketing costs, and then allocating them down to individual customers. Just for those of you who aren't used to Anaplan, this is an example of a dashboard. The entire model runs on these dashboards. So you choose who has access to which dashboards, and then who has access to what data. And the data is all controlled by these hierarchies. So in this case, this cost to serve dashboard, we're looking here at a particular version. So if I just choose my drop down, I'll look at the forecast to start with. So we can see for a particular forecast of our cost to serve data in a particular region, in this case the UK, but you can see my different regions here going down the list, and this is then my customer structure. So individual customers rolling up into account types. These hierarchies not only let you set security, so if someone's just in charge of Tesco's, they can only see the Tesco results. It also means that you can build the dashboard once and then slice through the hierarchies to kind of spin the data around and answer the questions that you want to get to. So I can change this to Asda, for example, see this particular dashboard, the cost to serve across the year, all the way down my accounts that I have for Asda. I can choose to switch it to another customer, as well as jumping in at the higher levels as well. So everything automatically aggregates live. So if I want to see my total profitability of my national accounts, for example, I can choose the higher level of the hierarchy. I have all my data here down at the customer type level. These hierarchies are completely customizable, both in terms of kind of the level of detail that you go to. Some of you, if you have obviously a lot of customers, you might not want to do every single one. You might do like a Pareto law and say, take the top 20% and then do the rest as buckets, for example. You have full control. Same way over actually how many hierarchies you have full control of what level of detail, what slices you want on your data, and it can be specific to individual line items if you wanted to as well. In this particular model, for everything down to standard margin, if I just choose a different dashboard here, you can see we actually go down to individual SKU. So I can see everything from my sales and my direct costs, not only now for national accounts or go down to Tesco's again as an example, but also for an individual product. So I can say, rather than Bedford standard, let's go for the Bedford special label, and I can see the standard margin down to individual SKU. Going back to the higher level where we had our full cost to serve, you'll notice this is just at the customer level. So you can vary the hierarchies depending on what you're planning or what you're reporting against. If I just go back to our home screen, the idea is just to take you through some examples of how we get to these numbers. So this is just an example model, more to give you the concepts, but essentially we're breaking it down into two key parts. There's costs that we're doing as driver-based, and there's costs that we're doing as allocations. Those two combined obviously give us everything we need to get to our cost to serve. The starting point for this, and obviously more importantly when you're looking at the planning side of cost to serve rather than just taking actuals, is actually planning our net sales in the first place. So we'll start there and then we'll start to move through some of our different cost components. Again, if people already have Anaplan models, you may already have some kind of sales demand plan already going down to units or customers, in which case perfect, all the Anaplan models integrate, so you can link one straight through into another model. So if you already have the demand plan done by customer, by SKU, for example, all we have to do is take that data, link it through, and then you have this starting point already in your cost to serve model. If someone's a new customer or looking at becoming a customer, then this can be built in as part of the exact same model, and you can build up the demand, which then will flow through, and obviously things like the units can be used as drivers for the rest of the costs. If we start here, and if we look at a particular SKU, so we got our Bedford standard for Tesco's in the UK, you can see just very simply we have the ability as maybe a demand planner to work out what our final volume is of units that we want to send through the rest of the process. In this particular case, this starts with a predicted baseline. This actually has a full statistical forecast behind it, which I won't go into too much detail because it's probably enough for a whole nother webinar, but essentially taking history down to an individual SKU level and then projecting it forwards by picking one of, I think it's about 25 or 30 different statistical forecasting methods, picking a best fit for you, and then using that as that starting point. So typically much more accurate than just saying, let's assume all sales across all products will be 3% higher, or even worse than that, just giving people a blank sheet to start with. We can actually use this engine to give us our starting point. And then back on our demand planners template, we take that baseline and then we apply adjustments to it. So this could be individual manual adjustments. You can see in this case, we've actually got actuals up until March, so we're predicting from April forwards. And I could say, actually, what if in April, I want to say 50 more units here and maybe 100 more units here. The idea behind the dashboard is they're not just used for kind of reporting analytics, they're also used for data entry. So Adam mentioned the idea of eliminating Excel books being sent around the business on emails, the idea being that everyone can log into Anaplan, it's cloud-based, have their own security, and then type numbers directly into the dashboards that you see here. Importantly, in terms of things like audit as well, everything is tracked, individual cell changes. If I show you the history here, are tracked down to who made the change, what they changed it from and to, as well as having workflow built in as well. So if you want to have people choose to submit data for approval, only if it's been approved does it get included in the plan, you can do that kind of thing as well. So we have individual cell changes like I've done here, and you can see how we're starting to come offline from the predicted plan, or we can do more wholesale changes. So what if, in this case, due to lockdown and different restrictions, our demand's going to change in this case by 30% across these periods? We can just tick that scenario on and see the impact. Same way if I tick these scenarios on, maybe I change this one to just being a 10% decrease. You see how easy it is to make some changes and get a new demand plan down to a very granular level that we have here. I'll show you as well when we get towards the end and we start looking at scenario plans, how you can do more top-down changes. So what if across all customers we sell 5% more? You can do those kind of high-level changes as well as doing this at the detailed level. Okay, so once we've got our demand plan, this is obviously across every single SKU, every customer, and across different regions in this case. Again, the hierarchy is being up to you. That then allows us to take that volume and turn it into kind of a sales number, a financial number. Obviously, the other half to working out the profitability is the sales in the first place. And so if I move through to net sales planning, we take that final volume still by different SKUs, different customers, different regions, and then we start to look at things like percentage of returns, as well as customer rebates. And you can see here any data that you have that's for the assumptions, so from individual contracts, maybe from source systems, or in many cases just from Excel. You can bring that data in and then use that to drive calculations. So in this case, we have a matrix of individual customers across brands, what percentage rebate they get on those sales, and that's what's feeding in down here as well. Importantly, although this is an example model that I'm showing you, all of the logic that you see in Anaplan, it's all configured, it's owned by end users. So if you want to calculate something in a very specific way, if something that you see here is more detailed than you would go to, or the other way around, if it's too high level, you have more detailed workings that you want to build in, it's completely owned and managed by yourselves. We start with the requirements of what you're trying to achieve, and then Anaplan gets built up based on those requirements. If you can build a model in Excel, then you'll be more than proficient in building that same kind of logic into Anaplan. Okay, so in this case, we have our rebates, we have our returns, and we get down to our net sales number. So in this case, again, still by individual SKU, customer and region, but this number here, the net sales number, if I bring that up to the total product level, so now we're looking at the total net sales for Tesco's in the UK. This is exactly the same figures that are flowing through to those resulting dashboards that we saw at the start of the demonstration. So everything here is linked. If I change a rebate percentage, if I change the number of units, that will instantly flow through to the final dashboards and update my cost to serve and profitability as well. And again, we'll see more of that when we start to look at the scenario plans as well. Okay, so just in the interest of time, let me move through. So in this case, if I go back to that dashboard that we started with, all of this section down to net sales has been covered off through the dashboards that we looked at. So planning out the volumes, rebates, allowances, getting down to a net sales number. This is now where it gets into more of the cost side and how we build up that total cost to serve individual customers. I mentioned before that there's kind of two splits in terms of how these costs get calculated. The first way is using driver-based calculations, so we'll look at those first. That's how we build up things like a direct material cost, direct labor cost, some of the freight costs based on number of pallets and those kind of things. And then we have the allocations, so anything that's more indirect or overhead type costs. So in this case, customer service costs, other allocated costs. We'll look at those second and see how we bring those into the model as well. Again, all the way down to individual customers. Okay, so starting with the direct materials cost maybe. So here again, as Adam mentioned, the kind of the scalability of Anaplan, the ability to go right down into detail. We're actually jumping down below even the SKU level into the individual materials that make up that particular product. But you'll see here, in terms of customizing the hierarchies, we've now stripped out customers and regions because in this case, it's irrelevant. The product costs the same to make regardless of who it's sold to. So we again customize the dimensions so it just has the ones related to the data that we're planning in this particular scenario. This is built up firstly from a bill of materials. So again, loading in the BOM from any source systems or perhaps from Excel. By SKU, the different materials and the units that go into those materials and the cost per unit. That then brings us through into this kind of table. So we already have our units that we planned out on the demand side. All we have to do is apply this material cost to those units, an A times B types calculation, to work out our direct material cost. Still with the ability to make amendments and changes where we want to. So in this case, by individual material, we have the ability to add different uplifts. So if we expect the cost of this to change across our planning periods, we can make those changes. Same way here, if I expect the cost of the cases to go up by 10% just for a couple of months maybe, I can make those kind of changes instantly flowing through into the detail here and then all the way through into those final cost to serve dashboards. Or at a high level, so some of all the materials, again, I can just put in a change here and do it at the manual adjustment level if I wanted to. Okay, so fairly simple A times B type calculations, but going all the way down to individual materials that come into the SKUs. This is one where some customers might do it just to a percentage base, so some kind of margin percentage. Other customers going down into the full bill of materials here. Moving on to something like the direct labor, for example. This again is based on the number of units we plan to sell that we've just done in our units plan, and then bringing that through, working out what labor we need, and therefore getting to a labor cost assigned to the customers based on the units that they're buying. This one takes the demand in units. We convert that into a demand in hours of staff. And again, using the dimensions here, you can see we're now down into individual staff types, individual sites, rather than being by customer, for example. So how many warehouse operatives do we need in this particular site? We calculate that by looking at things like the pick rate that they can do in an hour on productive time, how many hours someone typically works in a week, overtime that's allowed as standard, to work out the demand and therefore also look at the supply. And obviously by marrying up the two, if I come down here, we can see the current supply of labor, we have the demand for labor, and we can see in this case we have a staffing gap that is currently very small but starts to open up, especially in April and then through into December. Again, everything in Anaplan is linked, so if I change a demand number back on those early dashboards, we'll immediately see that flow through onto the labor side, and it will increase the staffing gap that we have here in the later half of the year. Again, we have the idea of triggers. So I can say, actually, what if we decided to hire people, so full-time resources? If I start in April and say maybe we hire 5 people in April, you can see how the gap starts to reduce. Maybe we hire 1 more in May and eliminate that gap for most of the year, and then choose to fill the rest with temporary labor, for example. So 200 hours of temp labor, and we've got most of our gap filled as we move through the year. So again, very simple driver-based, flagging up where there's issues using graphs and charts, allowing people to make those kind of assumptions, but ultimately ending up with a final staffing plan and obviously a cost associated as well. So based on things like salaries, or it could be the hourly wage, cost of overtime, cost of a temp worker, we get to a total cost, which again we can attribute to the individual customers, in this case based on number of units. But as I say, we'll move through and we'll look at the allocations based on other methods as well. I won't go into too much detail on some of the other driver-based pieces. We have things like freight, so down to individual Incoterm, attaching an Incoterm to a customer, looking at the units in a conversion table that says for how many units do they fit into a case, how many cases onto a pallet, cost per pallet, across different Incoterms. Again, a whole series of driver-based calculations to get to the cost it takes to ship to a customer. Again, what this means is by having everything linked, everything being driver-based, I can change the units, I can change the cost of any one of these components as far as freight goes, or I could change the actual Incoterm, not only against the customer, but down to a ship-to location. So in this case, underneath Tesco's, we've now got another level of detail where we have their distribution centers. So I can see to ship to Reading, we're using the Incoterm CPT. These are the costs. These are the pallets that we need to ship there by period, and then the total freight costs. I should mention in terms of time as well, this model is by periods at this point, but the actual demand plan goes down to weeks. And if you want to do full cost to serve down to weeks or even days, you can do that as well. Okay, so let me flip across and now look at some of the allocations rather than the driver-based calculations. So I mentioned, if I go back to the home page here, we have things like materials and sourcing that we saw, the manufacturing costs, like the labor costs. These are mainly done through driver-based calculations, getting us down to kind of the standard margin level that we saw before, including the individual SKUs. When we move across here into customer service cost, allocated overheads, we're doing it just down to the customer level, and we're allocating data from the top all the way down into the detail. The financials, any information that we're looking to allocate can be brought in from the source system. Anaplan's completely agnostic when it comes to source systems. So wherever your operating system, your GL, your ERP, we can bring the data in either directly and have it scheduled, or you can just choose to bring that in on demand when you choose to. Again, if you have an Anaplan model already that's maybe doing your financial plan, things like all of the salary costs for customer service, for example, can just be linked through from that model, or you can just bring them in from the GL system. If I jump into allocated overheads here as an example, you'll see here we're picking individual sets of costs. So in this case, I have my customer service overhead allocation to start with. I've also got things like the sales cost, order management cost, the planning overheads, all as kind of line items that have been fed through from the finance side. We take that account code. How much of it do we want to allocate? In this case, we're taking the entire customer service cost to allocate across our customers. There might be some examples where you don't want to allocate the entire lot, maybe not all of their time is customer facing. And then the allocation method. So here, just a few examples. We can allocate based on the volume, so the number of units like we've seen before. We have the revenue, so actually based on the pounds or whatever currency is that is being generated. The number of orders that are placed. Obviously, you might have some customers that perhaps buy less than others, but do so a lot more frequency. So you have a lot more orders that can obviously add to the overheads associated. Things like number of sales visits, so down to individual sales reps, how often they go to see this customer to attach different expenses to them. Things like evenly or just a custom profile that you want to assign. This is not an exhaustive list. These are just examples. Any metrics, any numbers that you have that you want to use as the basis for an allocation, as long as you can bring them into Anaplan, then you can allocate based on that metric. In this case, we said that for customer service overhead, a good basis to allocate based on is the number of orders that they placed. It could be some customers have ticketing systems, so you can actually tell exactly how many questions, requests, tickets an individual customer has raised, and you allocate based on that. In this case, we'll just take number of orders, and then we choose who do we want to allocate to. So in this case, I'm allocating it across every single customer that we have. I could say just allocate to a certain set of customers, so just allocate to grocery, for example, and you'll see that number's being split just between my grocery customers. Or if you want to actually pick a specific customer or just a list of several customers that you know that cost is associated to, you have full flexibility in terms of how you allocate it. In my case, I'm going to choose all customers. You can see the amount we're allocating, which is 625,000 for the year. The driver, so in this case, the number of orders that particular customer has placed over the, I think in this case, over the year, FY20, the percentage to be allocated, and then the resulting amount as well. That gets allocated down and then flows through into our detail here. So you can see here the customer service cost, the amount allocated to Tesco in the UK is 93,000 of that 620. If I flip this to the total customers, for example, we should see the total 625, that total amount being allocated across my customers. And that step just gets repeated. So for all our different cost categories, if I change this to something like the marketing costs, so actually let me change it up here to start with, we can see we're allocating marketing costs, all of the cost based on the revenue of each customer across all our customers. If I change it to something like the supply chain costs, in this case, we're basing it on volume. So you have complete control and choose what cost you want to allocate, the basis of the allocation, and then who the target of the allocation is. And again, all of this is live. So if that cost changes, in this case, if the supply chain management costs change, so in a finance model maybe, or on data import, as that value changes, as soon as it's been updated, the allocation will sync through, and the final cost of putting through into the cost to serve will update as well. Okay, so let me bring that through to the reporting piece again. I should say as well, if there are any questions, there's a chat box and a questions box, both in the GoToWebinar panes. Please feel free to use those, and I'll try and answer the questions as we go through as well. Okay, so in terms of what we're looking at here, we're back onto that first dashboard. So we've got now by customer, by region, all of those aspects that are making up our total cost to serve. We've got our net sales that we looked at to start with, and therefore we've got our profitability. As I mentioned before, the dashboards in Anaplan, you can use them as kind of a static report like we have here, or it can be used for more kind of ad hoc analysis, slicing, dicing, KPIs, and those kind of things, much like a BI tool might be used for. So once you have this data, in this case, I can look at different customers like we saw across different regions. We can therefore then start to spin it, slice it, and present it in different ways that are most useful to answer some of those questions that we've been looking for. So in this case, if I flip to the view by customer, here it's just been pivoted. So now you can see time is up in the pages here. I can say, right, for a particular period, let's say May, across all of my customers within the grocery section, within national accounts, what is that true cost to serve and net landed profit? You can see Tesco's and Asda here are profitable for the period. You can see that M&S not so much. So you can start to spin them and slice the data however you want to. You can also start to do direct comparisons between the customers as well. So if I choose a different dashboard here, we can look at here, pick a customer one, customer two. So I can say Tesco's, let's put them versus M&S, which was one that was unprofitable. And we can see here, Tesco's pretty much across the board beats M&S against all these cost categories. Returns, actually M&S is slightly better, but you see you can start to look at the difference, in this case down to a kind of a summary level. If you want to blow this up and have it down right into the detail and actually see what it is that makes Tesco's more profitable than M&S, for example, you can do that comparison customer for customer. And then we've got the same thing at the channel level as well. So in this case, looking at our national accounts versus our trade accounts, seeing the difference across our different metrics. If you want a kind of a more instant view, built in here, we also have things like the KPIs. So Adam mentioned more high level KPIs, things like sales volume, returns volume, but also the cost, net landed profit. You can use Anaplan to rank customers as well. So I can see here the top 10 across all my categories, see who's best, who's worst in the different categories that we have. These all just being examples. I should mention that all the dashboards that you see in Anaplan, you build them to how you want them to look, what data you want them to show. You just choose the the tiles that you include, any charts, any grids of data, pitch if you want to, put those onto the dashboard. And say if you know how to build a pivot table maybe in Excel, it's the same concept, just slightly easier because the structure's already there for you. You just choose which ones do you want to have in the columns, the rows, the pages, and then make it look pretty for the end users. Okay, so we're at the point where we've taken our data, we've planned out our sales volumes, our sales amounts, planned out various costs, either through some of those driver-based calculation rules or through the allocations that I mentioned to get to a cost to serve. Important, as I mentioned, that's all been done on the plan basis. If I flip this to the actuals, we have this concept of different versions as well. So if I flip to actuals, you'll see we have the same thing, but just on the actual periods. So more being done based on allocations or whatever detail you have in the ERP as well. The methodology can be different for the actuals versus the plan data. But then also importantly, you'll see we have the idea of a what if scenario. So Anaplan taking over where Excel starts to fall short in terms of that ability to do a snapshot, change a few numbers, and immediately see what the impact was of that change. So in this case, if I flip to scenario planning, you'll see here we have a completely different scenario, still applied to all the calculations, all the logic, but data being held separately. What that means, if I just flip to a different dashboard here, we can start to put these scenarios side by side and start to play with different attributes and see what variance results in the end. So my starting point before I start to play with the numbers is just to make these two scenarios identical. To do that, there's a tool now in Anaplan that's called a bulk copy. This basically allows you to take all the data from part of the model. So in this case, if I go to my different versions, you can see here we got the forecast and the scenario plan. I can say take all of my data from somewhere. So in this case, from the forecast, copy it to my scenario plan. So this is going to take absolutely every, obviously, customer and region and those kind of details, every unit, every comment, any percentages that I put in for uplifts. It will take all of that data and copy it into my scenario plan. And you'll see it takes about a second and a half to do it. That then gives me two identical sets of data here. So we got our forecast and we got our scenario plan, still by customer, by region, and by time period, but with two identical sets of data. If I spin this through and look at total channels, for example, you'll see we have it identical all the way down now our list. What this means, if I just flip this back to Tesco's, for example, is I can make an individual change and start to see what the impact is through my cost to serve and my profitability. This could be actually using a detailed dashboard. So if I flip, let me go to the revenue side as a starting point and my demand plan. If you remember the dashboard we looked at the start for revenue planning. Here we're looking at May 2020, so I'll change the number for May, and maybe I'll just put in a manual adjustment here, and I'll put in that we're going to have 1,000 more units in May for Tesco's as an example. You'll notice up here we have the scenario plan now selected, so these lower level dashboards still have that slice, and then up here I've got them pivoted. If I refresh that, we should, if I've typed into the right place, there we go. We see the change in volume, the change in returns as a result of those driver-based calculations. Anything that is driver-based, so our materials cost that we looked at, our labor cost that we looked at, you can see the change just by changing the units. We've got an increase in all these costs, hence these are negatives on the variance, but you'll see the cost for labor, for example, has gone from 13,000 to 13,794 based on that increase of 1,000 units. Same way for anything that's been allocated. So our order management overhead, for example, that was based on a number of orders. If I come down here even further, all of our allocated costs down here also been adjusted based on that change in units. So those details, those allocation methods, those driver-based calculations that we had, they sync through the model and they sync through live. So that single change, one period, one product, one customer, and just changing an extra 1,000 units, we can start to see the impact on our total cost to serve, not just for the period, but if I change this to the total year, we can see the impact that's had on our total year profitability as well. So in this case, we've got a forecasted profit of 12,000. scenario planning with the extra 1,000, they're actually more profitable because we've got that extra units, that extra margin, even despite the additional cost that's been allocated. So you can go back to any of those initial dashboards and make those changes, or you can see here, I've got some examples here that I can pull out as well. So directly on this dashboard, you can pop things out from this insights pane, change rebate percentages, for example. So again, on Tesco's, if I say maybe they get a 10% rebate on Bedford Bourbon, again, there'll be a change that's happened immediately through the model based on those changes that you make. So really easy when it comes to answering those kind of questions. As I said at the start, this could be because you want to do kind of a best case, worst case, expected case in terms of demand planning and how that flows through. It could be because you actually want to answer a specific question. So if I go to something like the workforce template we looked at before, the direct labor, what if due to certain restrictions, COVID and social distancing and things, the pick rate drops from 30 an hour to just 25? What would that impact be? We can start to plan out the answer to that question. Same way if we look at a customer that's actually unprofitable at the moment and say, what if we only sent out full truckloads of orders? So the quantity hopefully wouldn't change depending on the customer's response to it, but the number of orders that we have to deliver to them will do. What would that impact be if we change the Incoterm? If we change the minimum order quantity, so perhaps we have customers that order very frequently but not very much. What if we can start to group those into fewer deliveries? What will the impact be? You can really start to answer those questions. Same way I mentioned at the start, what if we actually drop a customer? So someone like M&S, for example, that seems to be losing us money, what if we actually dropped them? Obviously, in this case, we'd save the amount we're losing on them every month, but those other overheads, things like the supply chain management, the customer service overhead, would all be then allocated across fewer customers. So we'll be able to see the impact of that as well. Okay, so that in a nutshell is the cost to serve model. If I slip back to the home screen here, we can review what we went through. So this bit I didn't touch on, this is the import of the source data of the structures, planning out the sales, planning out the various cost components, either driver-based or allocations, and then some of the kind of the allocations you can, some of the analysis you can then do on that data, spin it around to whatever level you want to look at KPIs, or obviously that incredibly powerful scenario planning as well. Okay, so that said, I'm going to hand back to Adam just to close us off.
Thanks, Chris. If you just give us the ability to share. Yep. Can you see that screen, Chris?
Yeah, I can see it.
Excellent. So thanks for that, Chris. Really, really informative. Just moving on, just to bring us to a close. Just to reiterate, Anaplan, it's very much proven now. We continue to develop new use cases on there. It's business owned. It's developed for the processes. You don't have to shoehorn any processes into it. We'll work with you to ensure the best tool for your business. It's innovative in terms of the dimensionality, the scalability, the speed in which it can be deployed, the speed in which it can be used. You saw some of that scenario planning, what if pieces that Chris was doing there, which is all in real time. And then very much, and where we see a lot of our customers feedback is it builds trust. So both Anaplan is trusted as a platform, as you saw from the logos we showed earlier, but really building trust within your business, that you can now sit in decision making meetings with data that you can rely on and move the business forward off the back of knowing that that's the correct data. And again, that just brings that whole ecosystem together across your business. The more use cases, the more you start to develop that insight across the enterprise. Hopefully you found today's session informative. We'd love to hear from you if there's more information required. You can reach us at info@bedfordconsulting.co.uk, as is on the screen there. Equally, there is a wealth of information on our website. Certainly click on their resources page. There's plenty of videos and other collateral around the Anaplan platform and how it can potentially help you. So thanks for your time today, and look forward to catching up soon.